Well, we've got some heavy rains this evening, or at least some places we've had heavy rains, but there's still some going on in parts of New Jersey and in southeastern New York, Long Island, Connecticut, and on up into New England. So we'll be talking about that. And of course, we will be talking about Hurricane Lee and the risks for eastern New England and for Nova Scotia and parts of New Brunswick in Canada. And of course, we'll get into the long range. We've got Hurricane Margot out there as well, and a tropical wave that's probably going to become a tropical storm or a hurricane down the road. So, a lot on the table to chew through, and we'll chew through it and spit it out tonight on the Joe and Joe Weather Show, which of course is brought to you by our friends at Omni True Value Hardware at 1226 North Wellwood Avenue in West Babylon, New York, and Southwest Suffolk County on Long Island. Mulch, topsoil, and sand, salt this coming winter, and of course, whatever hardware you need to either make your home look great or to make sure it's safe in case there's a tropical storm or hurricane. 631-756-1125 is the telephone number. And of course, we can't find any prices anywhere because we've looked. And the website is
OmniTrueValue.com.
Tempest by Weatherflow. Joe, get the revolutionary Tempest weather system. Join the fastest growing observing weather network on the planet. The link is pinned to the top of the chat board. It's also on the descriptor to this video. And if you purchase anything from the Tempest weather site, from the Tempest website, be it the weather station or any of the other weather gadgets, gizmos, and weather fashion that they have, use the coupon code I want a weather station because deep down inside you do. And if you do, you get
10% off.
Yes.
And I have a question. You have a Tempest at your home, right?
I do.
Is it the same one that we're picturing during our little advertisement here?
It is.
Now, I noticed that unlike a lot of other weather stations, such as the one that I own, there's no anemometer, there's no cup spinning around, there's no wind vane.
Right, and no rain gauge. It does it all digitally.
Really?
Yes.
And so you get adequate or accurate wind and wind speeds with the temp. Well, I should say I shouldn't ask that. We know you do, but
yeah, you got to just make. I have it in an open. I had to move it to an open location where it gets at least 6 hours of sun, which it does, and it works fine. I've had no issues at all. And the rainfall measurements, although it's obviously is variability here in the mountains, but when I talk to my neighbors and my friends with their weather stations and their numbers and what the airport gets and all the rest of it, the numbers I get make complete sense with what everybody else has. So
as I mentioned yesterday, my weather station has had this periodic problem of the tipping spoon getting stuck, and it was stuck up until about 2 or 3 hours ago. We had, Joe, here in Putnam Valley, not one, not two, not three, but four, I would have to say, downpours. I mean, really torrential showers that came on through. And I guess number 4 was enough to finally loosen up the tipping spoon. And so once again now, after several days of not registering a thing, my rain gauge is finally back to registering. But we really had, and the sad part about it is that, I look at White Plains, I look to the north up toward Poughkeepsie, and they had some rain, but I mean, nothing to compare with what we had. So it's important for me to have an accurate rainfall estimate, even though, again, we were out of order for several days now. But, sometimes you look north and south or in and around the area to try to get an idea as to how much. But these storms, these showers were so localized and so heavy. I mean, I can't even guess how much rain I may have picked up today. It might have been, I'm sure we got at least an inch, maybe as much as 2 or 3 inches. Tom Contino, I know I could buy an inexpensive rain gauge at a hardware store. Why complicate it? I'll tell you what, Tom, why don't you go out and get me one and mail it to me? All right.
Bless his heart.
Yes, bless his heart.
All right. Well, speaking of which, thunderstorms and showers. So we're going to talk about Hurricane Lee, obviously, but before we do, let's do some of the weather that's going on now because we did get in east parts of eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England. Some heavy downpours, or as you like to call them, drownpours, and there's still some left over on the radar. So Joe Rayo will be doing the radars. So if you want to go ahead and do the radars, Joe, go right ahead.
All right.
And while you're setting it up, I will just say welcome to everybody on the chat board to tonight's Joe and Joe Weather Show, an event that occurs 5 days a week from Sunday through Thursday at 7:35 p.m. and sometimes on Fridays and Saturdays. We did one this past Saturday in case there's a tropical storm or a hurricane or some really nasty weather going on, especially in the wintertime. We'll always let you know about it. If you like the show, hit the like button because we love it when we get to 100 likes. So we already got 40 on the board, which is nice. And for those of you who are watching for the first time, welcome to you, and subscribe to my YouTube channel and set your notifications to on. And this way you will get notified that we are on. Then you won't miss a show, which is you don't want to miss a show with Joe Weather Show. Meanwhile, there's the Upton radar. Mr. Rayo, have at it.
Okay, well, you can see, and as much as I received quite a bit of shower activity during the mid-afternoon period, I'll tell you who really got walloped just in time for the evening commute was the immediate New York City area. They really got hit very hard. Also getting hit very hard was right around MetLife Stadium, where they're having that big football game, I'm told, tonight. First Jet game of the season with Aaron Rodgers. I noticed that coverage by the local sportscasters, they were all underneath the awning, so to speak, at MetLife Stadium to shield themselves from the heavy rains that were falling when they were doing the report. Basically, you could see that there's a line now. The activity is kind of tailing off now as the sun has set. Oh, dear me. 7:45, and the sun is now down. I mean, if that doesn't tell you, folks, that summer really is behind us and the days are getting progressively shorter, then nothing will do so quicker than having a dark late afternoon and early evening. But you could see that from central Massachusetts down through central Connecticut and down into the southern part of the Hudson Valley through New York City and then into central New Jersey, you have rain and showers. And again, where the reds are, that's where the very heavy rain is occurring. Let's take a look at a different aspect here. Let's go up. Well, first we'll go to Albany and see what they're showing. And what they're showing is basically not all that much. There are scattered showers, sporadic showers in and around the Capital District. But again, as Albany is picking up on those that line of showers I mentioned from Upton, from New York City radar, you can see again central sections of Massachusetts down through central Connecticut. Incidentally, our friend Dennis Cassia, who was at his 50th college graduation anniversary this weekend, coming in back to Connecticut. Now, Joe, he lives in Monroe, which is down here in Fairfield County. But the flight that he took him from Cleveland to Charlotte, North Carolina, and then from Charlotte up to Windsor Locks, Bradley Field.
Boy, that's doing it as an end around.
Yeah, and he arrived. I hope he arrived, but he arrived probably right in the middle of this stretch of moderate to heavy rain activity.
Well, he's watching us. Dennis is watching us right now from the tarmac at Bradley International. The gates are closed.
Oh, sorry, Dennis. Even if you had your bags and jumped in your car or whatever, you'd still would have had to travel from where you are down to your home in Monroe, probably in all of this rain. So maybe it's better that you could take a breather right now and hope that all of this stuff moves off to the east and things quiet down a bit for the next hour or two. But there you see, that's where most of the action is right now. Let's take a look at, let's go to the Fort Dix radar. And you can see that over central New Jersey, there's that narrow line of heavy-duty activity that's moving through. But across northern New Jersey, just some, scattered light showers. And across southern New Jersey, scattered light showers as well. So again, it looks like the main action right now, Joe, has moved east of New York City. Again, it's over central Connecticut and also in portions of north central Long Island. But all of this activity moving away. We'll get into a bubble of drier air tomorrow. Still rather humid, but dry with some partial sunshine. And then a stronger cold front will be approaching on Wednesday. And I just said off air to you, it seems to me like Wednesday could very well be a repeat performance of what many of us saw today. And that is showers. A few of them could be very heavy. And maybe in some cases, more than a few heavy showers moving on by. So our next day to get wet will be Wednesday. But after that, it looks like we have ourselves some very nice weather to enjoy Thursday, Friday, and right on through the upcoming weekend.
Correct. And that should be an indicator to you that if you are watching from eastern Pennsylvania to southern New England and points south, Lee is not going to be an issue for this area, unless it was to do some sort of, incredibly strange movements, which we know hurricanes can do, but we don't expect this one to be one of those times where we get strange movements. Maybe a different story for parts of eastern New England, and especially the northern part of eastern New England or the northeastern part of eastern New England. We'll get through the local weather and everything else first. I've got the wider radar view, and those showers extend up into coastal Maine. Joe pointed out the heavy rains, the little green boxes that pop up. Those are flash flood warnings, and there have been a number of them this afternoon and this evening. There's still 2 left. Meanwhile, out to the west with that next cold front, which is starting to set up. We're seeing some showers from Michigan southwestward across Illinois and Missouri, southeastern Kansas, and much of north central Oklahoma. And then go further west from there. We've got some heavier storms and a few severe storms across parts of northwest Texas, into southeast New Mexico, and into parts of the southwest, and even into southern California. Seeing some showers coming in from off the ocean and moving eastward into Southern California, and some of those are on the heavy side. We also have a pretty solid cluster of showers and storms and a few severe cells in parts of northeast Florida, but the rest of the state isn't really doing very much from that respect. And up in the lakes, we've got in the western lakes and into eastern Minnesota, we've got some showers and storms there that extend back into parts of North and South Dakota. The wider satellite view tonight, Lee has finally, after spending all this time outside the range of the continental U.S. satellite loop, is now in range, and you see it there on the lower right corner, and you can also see the eye that has come back during this afternoon and evening. The system is moving relatively slowly to the west-northwest. The heading has changed a little bit. It's been a little more westerly than northerly. It's been carrying 325 is a motion for a while, 325 degrees, which is a little more north. If it's northwest, it's like on the north side of northwest. Well, now it's moving 290, which is pretty much west-northwest. We'll see how long that motion holds, because that might be really important when it comes to how close it gets to the coastline, particularly for eastern New England. And you see the clouds back from the lakes going all the way down into the southwest and into southern California. Storm Prediction Center tonight has the marginal risk in West Texas and southeastern New Mexico, and also covering that cluster that's in northeastern Florida. Otherwise, it's just general thunderstorm activity everywhere else. When we look at day 2, which is tomorrow into Wednesday, just a small area of severe weather being indicated in parts of southern Arizona. General thunderstorms elsewhere, and actually more of the U.S. is showing no thunderstorm activity for tomorrow than is. And for Wednesday into Thursday, with the next cold front, we have a marginal risk of severe weather for much of Long Island, much of Connecticut, southeastern Massachusetts, actually much of eastern Massachusetts into southeastern New Hampshire, and just nosing in there into Maine. Maybe this gets stretched out a little bit when we get a little bit closer. We'll see what WPC does with that. And with regards to rainfall from I'm sorry, SPC, we'll do that. WPC does the rainfall. And now some of this is what's going on tonight. Some of this is what's going to go on Wednesday. And then more of this is what's going on with Lee, particularly in the areas in eastern New England and on up into Maine and New Brunswick. You see that very large area of red, which represents a minimum of 2.5 inches of rain, and in some cases it might be 3 or 4 inches of rain or more. Lots going to depend on how much of the tropical core is still there by the time it reaches that latitude. We'll have to wait and see. Otherwise, the other area of heavy rain is in central Texas, which is good because they really haven't had much rain come this past summer, and that heavier rain extends up half an inch to as much as an inch all the way up through the central Rockies, the west coast mostly on the dry side, and the southwest, well, at least southern Nevada, southern California, indicated to be dry for the next 7 days. Well, there's stuff going on there now, so they're missing out on that part of it in the forecast. But not much is going to go on from there going forward. So on that note, one other thing I just want to show everybody, at least from the surface map tonight. And I probably could have showed the map from last Thursday, and it would be pretty much the same with this stalled frontal boundary that is just sitting here up and down the East Coast, all the way down through the southern Appalachians, cutting Georgia in half, and then extending down into the Florida Panhandle, and then out to the west, where we have the next cold front, and this is the one that will be approaching for Wednesday, starting to organize with a front that's pushing through Lake Superior, another one with a low west of Chicago that extends down into another low in southeastern Nebraska. So that'll just get together and make one nice little cold front. It'll push on through, and everything will start to mend here in the in at least from southern New England southward. We can pretty much guarantee that for Thursday and Friday and beyond. So I'm going to get a close-up view here of Lee, Joe, and the hurricane. The eye has been struggling all weekend. It was kind of cloud-filled today, but on the latest loop, looks like it's starting to make a comeback again. Just sort of holding its own. Category 3, they're carrying 115 as the maximum wind, and I think that's fair based on the recon observations that I looked at earlier. And now we'll just wait and see. I think we have to see how far west does it get before it begins its turn to the north. Does it make it to 70 west? Does it only make it to 68 west? Because those 2 degrees could make a huge difference for somebody. But right now, it seems to be, a lot of the models have kind of zeroed in on how this is going to play out. There's not as much uncertainty as what we saw over the weekend with, things jumping back and forth, going further west, going further east, and all the usual games that we play. But they kind of settled on the idea here that this is going to move north, maybe right along 68 west, past not too far from Cape Cod, but offshore, and then maybe head up toward eastern Maine, western Nova Scotia, somewhere in there.
Yeah, it's going to be, and I'll mention again what I said last night on our show with Bill Goodman, is that probably we really will not have a very good handle on this until we're within like 72 to 84 hours, which would mean Thursday we'll most definitely be able to say, yes, it's going here, or it's going there. It's wherever it is going, there'll be more of a certainty with it, or security. Although right now, as I said, and I've been saying this day after day after day, almost since the beginning, that I honestly believe it is Cape Cod to down East Maine to Nova Scotia that are going to be in the zone of concern for where this eventually lands. And it's been wobbling back and forth from run to run, depending upon which model you're looking at. But I think the worst that we're going to see here in the New York City metropolitan area are probably clouds that'll be evident to us, especially from overhead to the east. That'll be because of the very large scale nature of Lee. Lee is growing in size, both in terms of cloud cover and also in terms of wind. In fact, Joe, I think that Thursday, we could start seeing the winds freshen up. Friday, a rather breezy day, and maybe just downright windy here on Saturday as the storm makes its closest approach to us, followed by a diminishing of the winds as the system either moves on land, Maine, Nova Scotia, New Brunswick, somewhere well to our north and east. That would be for Sunday.
What's your take on any kind of tidal issues? I would think that they should be at a minimum, because it's not as if we're going into a screaming east wind for 24 hours or so before the wind's back around to the north. We do have the new moon, but I think because a lot of folks that live right along the immediate coast, especially after Hurricane Sandy, are really kind of hypersensitive, and rightfully so, with regards to tidal issues. But I tend to think they should be fairly minimal. If maybe there'll be one tide where things are running a little bit on the high side, but once those winds go around to the north and northwest, it will not be a problem.
Yeah, well, you don't ever want to have any kind of a storm occurring either at full or new moon, and the moon will be at new phase on Thursday, so the tides will be astronomically higher than normal. But unlike the full moon that we just had about a week or so ago, which came or coincided with perigee, the moon's closest approach to the Earth, this new moon will be at the apogee point. So it's going to be as far out from Earth, like 251,000 miles, as it possibly can get. So that certainly may negate any influence of the tides on Thursday and on into Friday. But still, I mean, there's going to be swells, there's going to be rough seas. And, people who, you're right, Joe, people think back to Sandy, but remember, Sandy took a much different track. The track that Lee is taking is more of the traditional track relative to New York and the northeastern United States, that being that it stays offshore and moves off to the north and east. We're on the more or less backside of the storm, and we're getting winds that are going to be coming mostly from the north or even from the northwest. Of course, with Sandy, that storm made a beeline for central New Jersey, and the winds were coming in from a southerly and southeasterly direction and literally pushing that water onshore. And of course, that also coincided with the full moon. So that's why it was so devastating in New York and Long Island, because the winds were helping out in pushing all of that water onto the shore areas and causing the tremendous flooding. That's not going to be the case this go around with Lee.
79 likes so far, Joe, which is great. Thanks for those of you who've hit the like button, and there's almost 300 folks that are watching right now. We appreciate you being here, and if you do like the show, please, by all means, hit the like button, because we love it when we get over 100 likes. It makes us really feel good about ourselves. So I have a this is I got to save this link because I really like this link. So this is I'm going to also put this up on the chat board for those of you who, if I can just get this darn thing to copy it for me. There we go. So for those of you who'd like to look at it on your own, what they do here is they take the ocean water temperatures and they basically plot the tropical systems over them so that you can actually see where these storms in terms of their track. And I want to point out specifically now, if we had not had Hurricane Franklin, this picture would probably look a lot different. But this whole area here, and I'm just going to outline it in red. It's kind of in this yellowish zone, okay? This is all ocean water temperatures that are running at around 26°C, and that's enough to support a tropical storm and maybe a minimal hurricane, but it's not really warm enough to support a major. And once Lee gets inside that zone, and this is due to the fact that Franklin and also Idalia, as a post-tropical cyclone, moved through within a couple of days of each other, and upwelled all this water. So we have this very large eddy of cold water, relatively speaking. And you'll notice, by the way, on that line that's on the furthest north that I drew, the red line, just above it is the darker red. That's 28. That's the Gulf Stream. So Lee will emerge, come out of that eddy and go into the Gulf Stream, but it's only a handful of miles wide. Maybe it's about 60 miles wide or so. And then after that, it goes into the really cool water temperatures, which are under 25 Celsius. And that's by the time it reaches 40 degrees north, of course. And at this stage, you're going to see this weaken down to a category 1. I think that's fair. Given the cold ocean, the colder ocean, I would think it's certainly going to have an impact on the strength as it's moving northward. And this, by the way, is the Hurricane Center's forecast track from their advisory. So they've just laid it right over the ocean water temperatures. And then you also, to the east, you can see Margot, which is over warm water and has become the season's 5th hurricane, and it's a minimal hurricane. It's actually forecast to strengthen briefly to a 2 while it's inside a warmer eddy of water, and then it too is going to run into some cooler water as it goes further to the north.
And is that area down in the lower right-hand corner the cone of uncertainty for what may eventually become our next tropical system?
Right, well, these
perhaps?
are off the tropical weather outlook, and in fact, they're labeled here. So you've got 98L, which is the one that's southeast of the Cabo Verde Islands. That's the one that they carry as a 60% probability out 7 days, and that's the area, that big oblong, whatever you want to call it, shape that they have out there. That represents 98L. So 97L, which they have a 10% chance, is actually forecast by the Hurricane Center to be absorbed by 98L. So 98L will absorb 97L, and then that one has a 60% probability on the tropical weather outlook for becoming a tropical storm, and all of the weather models seem to be picking up on this as well. And I know everybody that looks out far enough into the long range, especially from the overnight guidance, they saw, I think it was last night's 0Z run that took it right up the coast, and then the next run, of course, takes it halfway up the coast and then took it out. But I'm not even looking at that. So that's for when Leah's played itself out. The Hurricane Center 5 p.m. position is 23.6 north, 64.2 west, and that's a good solid 300 miles plus north of Puerto Rico. Top wind's 115 miles an hour, moving west-northwest at 7, and you see they keep it as a major through 2 p.m. Wednesday. And then as it starts to approach that colder eddy, it goes from being a major hurricane to a Cat 2 for Thursday afternoon and evening. By Friday afternoon, 2 p.m., it's well northwest of Bermuda and east of the North Carolina coast, moving on a maybe northeast or just east of due north, and then a straight northward motion from there from 2 p.m. Saturday. Joe, the global models have kind of sped this up a little bit, so I wonder whether they are a little bit, they seem to have caught up a little on the speed by pushing it further northward, but I'm wondering now if that winds up being the case, whether they might be just a tad slow with this.
Well, what can I say, Joe? I mean, like we're still a good number of days away from the storm making landfall. I kind of got a chuckle when I was watching the CBS Evening News, anchored by Norah O'Donnell, and on the top headlines, she said, "And now Hurricane Lee has a path which takes it, it takes it into the United States or makes landfall in the United States." I said, "What the heck is she talking about?" And then, of course, if you look at the map here, the 2 p.m. Saturday map has the cone of uncertainty widening out enough so that on the left side of the cone, that encompasses Rhode Island, eastern Massachusetts, and Cape Cod, and just barely skims down East Maine. So the assumption is that if the storm were to go way over to the left of the current median prediction, the middle part of the forecast path, if it were to go way over to the left, yes, then there's a chance that it could interact with, let's say, Cape Cod or eastern Massachusetts. And just because it does that, I guess there are some news agencies that say, and now the latest information from the Hurricane Center is that the storm could very well make landfall in the United States. And, give me a break.
126 likes, Joe. 126. Thank you for hitting the like button. Joe and I appreciate it. If you haven't done it yet, go ahead, by all means. Hurricane model forecast guidance was a little interesting today. There are a few outliers still. Actually, there are more outliers today than there have been all along, and you can see them. The ones that sort of take this, more northwest course, and you got to love the brown one here, Joe. I can't see what model that is because the other one is kind of laying on top of the label that's there. But that turns it northwestward pretty sharply and has it going toward Nantucket. There's a couple of these that get it to. There's the HWFI, I think that's what that is. That is east of Cape Cod, but that track is northwest and is pointing for the central Maine coast. But the majority of them, they kind of hook it a little bit west of north once it gets north of 40, and that's in response to the changing upper air across the northeastern Great Lakes. And then it takes a sharp right turn, either into western Nova Scotia or in that, what is that body of water? What is that?
That the Bay of Fundy?
The Bay of Fundy. Okay, well, the Bay of Fundy. So you have actually a number of them taking it right into and through the Bay of Fundy as it heads its way onto the northeast. So the fact that they remain fairly clustered lends a high confidence to the consensus forecast that's there. These outliers are outliers until you see more of them. Then you start to, think, well, maybe, something's going to happen that might be a little bit odd. And on the intensity guidance, which shows Cat 3 for another 60 to 72 hours. There are three of the models get it to a Cat 4 between now and, say, Wednesday evening. And then you see this gradual decline in strength as we go beyond 72 hours to a Cat 2 and then to a Cat 1. And then by day 5, you start to see some of them. Day 5 now is taking us to Tuesday, Wednesday, to Saturday, early Saturday. You see it down, right at the borderline of a Cat 1 and a strong tropical storm. So let's look at the I don't even know which one. This is one of these games today now, where, Joe, with these models, they kind of know where it's going to go in general. But now we're dealing with the lunacy of the 12Z run is to the left and the 18Z run is to the right. At the end of the day, you can just sort of split the difference between the two. But there's Lee coming up northwestward. We're now into Wednesday morning. You also see the approaching cold front to the coast. Now, here's the thing. If this were going to be a system, this is where the cold front is Wednesday morning, okay? Now, if we were going to be concerned about something that was going to impact the coastal areas, say from Virginia northward, you would need to see that front being, hanging back at least on the west side, along the Appalachians or on the west side of the Appalachians. But the fact that it's on the coast is kind of telling you, and moving, that's the other thing. It's moving. This one's not stalling out like the one we've been sitting in for the last 4 days. This one is moving. So eventually it's going to settle itself offshore, creating, kind of the alleyway, as I like to call it, for Lee to move along. So unless there's some big surprise that this weather front is going to get hung up to our west, and there's no real indication of that happening, I think the way the guidance is reflecting the movement of this pretty much sums it up as to where this is going to go. And now the question, I think, becomes, is there going to be some kind of hiccup because of what's going on in the upper air, that you get this sort of a little hook to the left when it gets to the latitude of, say, just south of Cape Cod, which is going to have implications, say, for coastal Maine down into eastern Massachusetts. That to me is the remaining question here.
And another thing is that, if you're talking about the possibility of it making as we were talking about last night with Bill Goodman, that sharp left hook. The storm, as it continues on a northward trajectory, is only going to increase in forward speed. And so, if the thing were moving relatively slowly or slower than what is now being projected, a turn to the left is one thing, but if it's really moving quicker, if it's really starting to pick up speed, then actually making a sharp turn to the left is going to be a lot more difficult. It would probably be more likely, based surely on momentum, that the storm would take a track more to the north as opposed to the northwest. And so that's why I think in the end, while, Cape Cod, Nantucket, Martha's Vineyard, it'll be a close shave for them, and could very well be a close shave also for down East Maine. I think Nova Scotia has something to worry about, just like they did last year with Fiona. It would seem that that's going to be the track for later on in the week, and of course we'll have a much better handle on that by Thursday and Friday. But again, for New York, and you could see on the upper level map that Joe was just showing, the 500, how tight the height lines start to get. The gradient in the upper atmosphere really begins to tighten up and places New York City and Long Island within that. So that's probably the reason why we're going to be seeing a noticeable uptick in the winds. Kind of breezy here on Friday, and just maybe downright windy on Saturday. Winds could gust. I think Tom Contino was asking what I was thinking. I think sustained winds could be 20 to 30, and I wouldn't be surprised, especially on eastern Long Island, if winds were gusting past 40 or maybe even 50 on Saturday. And I think the freshening of the winds will actually begin perhaps as early as later Thursday. So Thursday, Friday, Saturday, and part of Sunday, the winds certainly are going to be quite noticeable in and around the tri-state region. But those winds coming from a drier north or northwest direction should maintain a dry airflow for us and keep whatever precipitation that's associated with Lee off to our east and out and away from our area.
I've got the upper air map. It may be running a little bit behind. You might not be able to see it yet, Joe. But the first trough is approaching on Wednesday, and it's a fairly sharp trough that's moving eastward. By early Thursday morning, its axis from about across Lake Ontario southward down into Western Virginia and to maybe to South Carolina, let's say Myrtle Beach. That first trough pulls Lee northward, passes west of Bermuda, and actually, when we get into Thursday evening, the trough axis, that trough's actually moving along. That trough axis runs from about Montreal, south-southwest to western Maine, across Long Island to just off the coast of the Delmarva Peninsula. That lifts out very quickly and leaves Lee behind. So now Lee is sort of sitting there at about 35 north, and it's moving northward. The next upper low, and you see it there on the map in the middle on the upper center of the GFS here, that's the next trough that drops in. That's the one that causes it to turn briefly northwestward, and you can see the upper feature hooking there to the northwest. By the time we get to Saturday morning, actually the center is not that far off from Cape Cod. And then, of course, as that trough begins to swing around, Lee gets ejected to the north and then to the northeast again. And look at that upper low. I'm just watching this next upper low, Joe, for Sunday. Dropping down into the western lakes, it's 1, 2, 3, 4 closed and just rotates. It just sort of rotates eastward. Of course, reaches the northeast, and at this point, now we're into the middle of next week, we have another hurricane approaching the Bahamas, and I guess that would be Nate. Now, the early view of this... Nigel, I'm sorry. So the early view of this on the 18Z run, Joe, is that it's turning it northward east of the Bahamas, and then it moves straight north up the east coast and goes right across Long Island. So why don't we look at this on the surface and least have a few laughs, because we know that this is going to change again and again and again and again as we go through this. But all the models do develop this into a hurricane, and you see it here east of the Bahamas, just kind of going straight up. the thing is, when you got a map at 288 hours that shows an almost perfect track for a hurricane hit or a snowstorm hit, that kind of thing, 99 times out of 100, it's not there on the next run, and it might actually be more than 99 times out of 100. But there you go. Um, they all seem to this year. We've had Franklin, uh, Idalia in a different sort of way. This one, Lee, and maybe the next one all take somewhat similar tracks. So you could look at this and you could look at the overall pattern we're in and we've been in, and you can say, well, what makes this one any different than the other three?
Well, I've just shared with you, um, based upon what the GFS is, the 18Z GFS is saying for Nigel. And this is not Nigel's path. This is actually a hurricane that you and I lived through in August of 1976. This is the path of Hurricane Bell. And take a look at this and tell me how similar Bell's track is compared to what is being predicted or forecast for Nigel in another week or so.
Well, the only thing I would point out though is Bell actually formed east of the Bahamas from a tropical wave that came across the Atlantic and didn't really develop. That was during a period in the mid 70s to there was about a period of about 4 or 5 years, actually might have been even longer than that, where there was hardly any tropical storm development in the major development region. You had tropical waves, of course, that moved out, but most of them developed once they got west of 60 degrees west. There were hardly any that developed out in the major development region like we've gotten used to over the last number of years. But yeah, I do certainly remember this one for sure. And yeah, that's split Long Island in half. But this was in early August when this one happened. And
if you remember, we had Donna in September of 1960, and this was the first real hurricane threat that the New York metropolitan area had since Donna. We went through 16 years of tranquility. Now, there was one tropical storm that barreled through the immediate New York area late in August of 1971. That was Tropical Storm Doria. That was about as close as we came to any kind of a tropical cyclone interaction. So, but if you overlook that, which was really nothing more than several hours of heavy rain for the area, but if you overlook that, 16 years,
yeah,
Joe, from 1960 to 1976 before we finally had Bell, and then we had to wait another 9 years for Gloria in 1985.
yeah,
Back
there were
then,
long.
back then, tropical cyclones, tropical storms, hurricanes in the New York metropolitan area were very few and far between. They were slim pickings, as opposed to what we've been seeing in recent years, where it seems like every other year there's a threat for our area from some kind of a tropical system.
Leon Probitsky hit the tip jar tonight, Joe. Thank you, Leon. And so did Robert Lomanicki. His first hit of the tip jar, I'm getting a message to celebrate the first super chat from Robert Lomanicki. Thank you, Robert. Most appreciated from both of you for hitting super chat tonight. And thank you very much, by the way, for the 155 likes that we've picked up so far. Always good to see that people like the Joe and Joe Weather Show. We're coming up on 8:20 Eastern Time. I'm feeling a little bit off tonight. So we're going to wrap up the show here just a little bit early. Not too early, but a little bit early. So just want to give a big thanks to everybody that is here. And Joe and I, do you have a Briller Jeopardy?
I do.
Yeah,
but
let's hold on to it for a bit, okay? And
Okay.
Joe and I will be back tomorrow night at 7:35 p.m. Eastern Time. There's coverage that goes on during the day on YouTube from me. I usually put up 2 videos, Weather in a Minute and Weather in 5. I only did one today, which was the Weather in a Minute, which is in reality Weather in a minute and a half. For technical reasons, I do it in a minute and a half, but I try to brand things and it never seems to really work out. And I didn't want to call it weather in 90 because somebody's going to look at it and say, I can't sit through a 90-minute weathercast.
Nah. Huh.
So back,
You do squeeze everything
yes.
in.
So back tomorrow night at 7:35 p.m. You can follow my coverage here on YouTube when videos come out. Also, if you go to the community section of my YouTube channel, I do post links there to my website where for those of you who would rather read rather than watch a video, which is understandable. Some folks would prefer just to read. They like to look at graphics and that kind of thing and have it up close. I put links up on the community page every day. So just check out the community page on my YouTube channel.
Absolutely. And let's not forget 22 years ago today, a very sad day. This country went through quite a bit, and we will not forget the events that transpired on this day back in the year 2001.
Yes, it's a very, very sad day indeed. All right, folks, have a great evening. We'll see you tomorrow at 7:35. Good night.
Good night, folks.